has just started last year, and as a practitioner, we have begun our academic career in this university. Sambalpur is known world over for its ethnic fabric that has made Sambalpuri brand as a great industry. Sambalpur as a city doesn't lag behind in the domain of higher education. It's expanding its brand as center of higher excellence continually. Again, I would like to welcome you all to this August morning and to this August gathering. As a young university, the department of this university has been trying to contribute its best to the glory of the city. This three-day national webinar is a modest endeavor of the Department of Sociology to add value to its academic excellence in its own way. We are indeed elated to have with us the who's and who of Indian sociology, who with us in our company, who gracefully enlightened us with their insightful ideas. We have with us Professor Atanu Kumar Pati, esteemed Vice Chancellor of our university. He is the man behind this function. With his able leadership, tireless hard work as an administrator, the university has made fast and remarkable progress in the very short span of time. And his presence is a strength for all of us. So I heartily welcome you, sir, to this webinar. We have with us another eminent personality, Professor C. Aruna from Pondicherry University. She is a well-known figure in the domain of sociology. She has an interesting connection to the department. The present head of the Department of Sociology of GM University has taken her PhD degree under her guidance. Nothing can be more rewarding than this moment when the teacher come to grace and bless the student. So welcome you, ma'am, to this webinar. Again, we have with us Professor Ashok Kal, a veteran in sociology, a doyen of Indian sociology. He is one of the senior most sociologists in the country, a scholar of national and international repute, the grand old man of Indian sociology. Once again, I welcome all the participants, students, researchers, academicians to this 3 days webinar. Thank you all for your joining this event in due time. And now I welcome our HOD, Dr. Manosika Smita Mahapatra, to present the concept note of the webinar. Thank you so much.
Good morning to all of you. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Atanu Kumar Pati, esteemed keynote speaker of the day, Professor Ashok Kumar Kaul, my revered teacher, Professor C. Aruna, special guest of the day, researchers, students, officials, media persons, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to have a dialogue on a very pertinent topic of sociological importance, that is the issue of livelihood from gender perspective, that too in the context of COVID-19. The pandemic COVID-19, as one of the biggest disasters in the world history, has engulfed the mankind. It has jeopardized humanity, cutting across national boundaries. It is known for its certain visible characteristics. It is global, immeasurable. True, this has affected almost all human beings in various ways, but it has not affected everyone equally. Its impact varies in degree from country to country, within country, from state to state, within state, from region to region, and within region, of course, from locality to locality. It is often argued that the pandemic doesn't affect men and women alike. Women are the worst hit. The reasons are clear, yet far more complex. It goes without saying, the pandemic has broken the economic backbone at its every level, starting from the individual to the national level. While it has rendered many jobless, it has also left some others homeless and destitute. The plight of migrant laborer is a case in point. No wonder instances of suicide are catching news and headlines. Most of the companies have either shut down or have begun to process of retrenching their employees fully or partly. The condition of construction workers, street vendors, wage laborers, and those engaged in unorganized and informal sectors are equally precarious. Less said is better. In a situation whereby the pandemic has brought the world into a standstill, rendering almost everything paralyzed, the struggle of the bread and butter is on. There is a need by everyone to manage 2 square meals a day for physical survival as well. Except government employees, almost everyone begins to experience a serious threat to one's livelihood. It is in this context that the 3-day national webinar assumes its meaning. It seeks to analyze the impact of COVID-19 on people's livelihood and its consequence from the gender perspective. In consonance with Indian tradition, it is always ideal to initiate every modest endeavor with the kind intervention and blessings of the guardian of the family. Yes, I'm talking about the head of the Gangadhar Meher University family. He is no other than our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Atanu Kumar Pati. He is a scientist of international repute. He is one of the topmost chronobiologists of the country. He has total publications. He has reviews, refereed journals, refereed India journals in proceedings, research guidance as 23 scholars in PhD degrees, teaching experience of 3 decades. He carries a recognition of Fellow of National Academy of Science, India 2003, the first Fellow of Indian Society for Chronomedicine 2015, Fellow of National Academy of Medical Science 2018. His academic experience is far rich. He was a director, academic staff college of Pandit Ravi Shankar Shukla University, Raipur. He was director, National Center for Natural Resources 2012 to 17. He carries a series of awards and honors. President, Indian Society for Chronobiology. Council member, World Federation of Society of Chronobiology. Member, State Pollution Control Board, Odisha. Fellow of National Academy of Sciences, India. And prior to his venture in GM University, Sir was Vice Chancellor, Odisha State Open University, and he is Professor and Learn from Pandit Ravi Shankar Shukla University, Raipur. I welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, to give his inaugural address. Up to you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Very good. I'm sorry for the technical problem. So on behalf of Gangadhar Meher University, I welcome all of you to this webinar entitled Gender and Livelihood During COVID-19, a Sociological Perspective. So today we have with us very distinguished Professor of Sociology, Professor Ashok Kaul from Banaras Hindu University, and I welcome you, sir. I also welcome Dr. C. Aruna from Pondicherry University. And in this particular session, we have 2 distinguished sociologists of repute, Professor Ashok Kaul and Dr. C. Aruna. Please welcome these 2 professors. I welcome all of you to this webinar, and this is a topic, very interesting topic and very latest and contemporary. And because you know that I do not belong to the subject sociology, but I would just want to have a presentation, a small presentation, just to initiate this Can you see the presentation now? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir, we can see.
Thank you. So, I just collected, looking at the internet, I collected some of the Twitter messages. And this is a message I want to read it out. In many Latin American countries, there has been a significant increase, a doubling in some cases, in reports of domestic violence and murders of women and girls since stay-at-home orders were set up to contain the virus. Then if you go to another tweet, being isolated at home is not safe for everyone. Many women find themselves having to choose between risking exposure to the virus or facing rising violence at home. Yet another. So if you look at the statistics, you will find that domestic violence cases jumped in Colombia by 91%. In Mexico, it is by 36%. In Argentina, it is about 25%. And then there are many other countries of South America that is facing the similar problem. So now, this is I do not have any data on India. I hope in this platform, things will be discussed about the domestic violence during the pandemic. So then, what is important that when women lose their jobs and with it their financial independence, they can find themselves dependent on a violent partner. So this is a very big issue, and I do not know how much it is correct for the Indian scenario. So now there is an important aspects many people are not considering it, that is about the sex workers. So now I just took this from a Mumbai Live platform. So now how sex workers in Mumbai's Kantipur are surviving to the coronavirus lockdown. One can come across the trouble, they are facing these days. Now, if you look at the sex workers of Delhi, then you will find that 60% of sex workers in Delhi return to their home states. So the important question that arises is that if there is a 2016 estimate by UNAIDS, which is headquartered in Switzerland, they estimate that there is about 6,57,829 sex workers in India. But others predict that this figure is much more higher, and maybe it is more than 8 lakhs in India. So now question is that this sex work is a very big financial system, and many people are dependent on this particular business. So then anyone could analyze that what is the financial implication on this particular trade, sex work, and it is sociological relations and relations repercussions on the Indian economy. So these are some of the important areas that I think will be probably discussed. And this particular area is not very openly discussed, that how these guys are leading their life during this pandemic. So with this brief introduction to the subject, I would like to pass on the platform to Professor Ashok Kaul. But prior to that, I would like to convey my gratitude to other distinguished professors, especially Professor Navnita Rath from Utkal University, Professor R.N. Sharma from Patna University, and Professor Nagaraju Gundimeda from University of Hyderabad, and Professor Tapan Mahanti from National Law Institute University, who will be participating in the forthcoming subsequent series sessions of this webinar. With these words, I welcome all of you, and I wish you a very successful webinar on a very contemporary topic, and that is the gender and livelihood during COVID-19, a sociological perspective. And I am very much happy that Dr. Manusmita Mahapatra, convener of this webinar, is doing wonderful work, and I congratulate her on behalf of Gangadhar Mehar University, and I also congratulate her colleague, Dr. Kumud Chandra Panigrahi, the co-convener of the webinar. So I once again wish you good luck for this very interesting webinar, which is taking place in 3 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful speech. And now, moving on to the next agenda, we have with us Professor C. Aruna from Pondicherry Central University. That is the place that has taught me the ABC of sociology. Professor Aruna is my revered teacher. Today, I feel that I am in her classroom again. She is not only my teacher, I have obtained my PhD degree under her guidance. I owe my sociological imagination to her. My happiness knows no bound today that myself and my colleague, Dr. Panigrahi, are the founding teachers of the Department of Sociology in GM University, and this national webinar is our first academic venture where I am the convener and where my esteemed teacher and PhD guide has come all the way from Pondicherry to grace the occasion. Nothing can be a better blessing for a student from a teacher than this. Madam, with your presence in this webinar, I feel immensely blessed. Madam Aruna is currently acting as an associate professor in sociology in Pondicherry University. She is also heading the Center for Women Studies of the university. She is not only a popular classroom teacher, but a role model for the students for her sincerity, diligence, and serious classroom transactions. Her areas of research interest moves around social network, women and elderly issues. She has been exposed to many international training programs on her social network analysis and life courses perspective. Her recent research project includes ICSSR-funded social networks of rural elderly women, implications for healthcare services. She has been a research grant on parental involvement of peer group support for academic performance, and her research study on migrant women in unorganized sector with special reference to Puducherry, supported by National Commission for Women. Madam Aruna has also adorned many administrative positions. Her administrative competencies have placed her in many key decision-making positions of the university and outside the university. To name a few, she has been a member of Executive Council and Academic Council of the university, and she has privilege to become a member of Institutional Ethics Committee for Intervention Studies at JIPMER and expert member for Gender Sensitization Programs of the National Commission for Women. Madam, I, on behalf of the School of Sociology, GM University, take the privilege to welcome you to this webinar as a special address speaker. Ma'am, I request you to deliver your special address. Up to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Manusmita, for your very generous introduction. I'm really overwhelmed. Thank you. Well, I'm very pleased and honored to be here on this very timely and well-conceived webinar. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Atanu Kumar Pati, sir, respected sir, We are very happy that you have taken efforts to help these, young professors organize this webinar. Thank you for that. And respected key speaker, Professor Ashok Kaul, Dr. Manusmita, Dr. Kumuta, faculty of School of Sociology, and faculty from all the other schools of GM University, and scholars and student participants. Greetings from Puducherry. Webinars of this kind provide us a platform to take stock of the present situation and provide the think tank to move forward. In a matter of months, the novel coronavirus has quickly spread and undermined the seemingly stable social systems. Although researchers and practitioners from public health, epidemiology, all of them dominate the public discussions, I personally feel, and I'm sure my colleagues here share, the field of sociology is uniquely qualified to assess the causes and consequences. The spread of virus has ramifications for the health and well-being of all individuals, and especially for me, as a social gerontologist, I personally feel the elderly or a vulnerable group. Well, it also affects the families, communities, and the social institutions. Our disciplinary orientation, I'm sure, helps us understand why some societies fare better in handling the situations and why others not, and where do we stand, how do we move forward. I'm sure these kind of webinars would help us to do that. Now, well, when we begin with this, the coronavirus, yes, the key word here starts with the social distancing. I'm sure that all of you agree with me that it emerges as a first line of defense. But as sociologists, I would prefer calling this as physical distancing or body distancing, as the term is associated with the social hierarchy and discrimination. Well, in today's lecture, I thought I would focus more about the livelihood impact and also especially focus on the gender issues related to this impact. Well, when we consider this COVID-19 global pandemic, and its associated containment measures, it has taken a heavy toll on the economies and societies worldwide. And India, with its national lockdown, imposed since 24th March and then extended. And yes, it has its cost. It has an impact, or it has a profound effect on the employment and earnings with quite a large section of the population. A number of surveys clearly show that livelihoods have been devastated at unprecedented levels. Food insecurity and economic vulnerability are key challenges in this health crisis. And this is really, exaggerated, or it has been increased to very staggering proportions. Well, we understand that as a health issue, yes, it is really an issue of concern, but the associated changes, the associated impact has been much more larger, and it has long-term effects. Well, when we see the society, when we read the newspapers, yes, the hunger deaths and suicides linked to the economic stress are being reported from various parts of the country in varying intensities and in varying dimensions. Well, this has become an issue of concern, and since this webinar is focusing on the livelihood aspect, I'm trying to fix myself only to the economic domain, though it is all interlinked. Well, when we started thinking of this, or when we started being part of this lockdown, it was, I'm sure, the government agencies, and of course the government, it was clearly well written that the lockdown may lead to a loss of livelihood for many. But it is a choice between saving lives or livelihoods. So when it's choice between these two, is the former naturally becomes an automatic choice. It is also pertinent that the livelihoods, if the livelihoods are not saved, the measures of lockdown get violated and lead to loss of lives. Whatever, maybe we may start with saving lives, but livelihoods is equally very, very important. And is when we look at the long-term impact, this is where we need to focus. But there is also a positive line to it, that given the strength of the high young population, the Indian economy can get moving. How do we move? and what are the strategies is what we really need to look for. The uncertain nature of the pandemic is making extremely difficult for the governments across the world and also in an Indian context to formulate policies. In India, definitely, it's a bigger challenge. For us, given the huge informal economy, which is filled largely with the migrant labor, it expectedly, definitely, once this lockdown was implemented, yes, it would have, we all would have realized that it leads to loss of livelihood for many. But without choice, what are those impacts and how do we manage are things that we need to really look at. Well, if we look at this theory of livelihoods, it is a result of interdependencies between economy, polity, society, and culture. Anyway, in this current context, when the loss of livelihoods is not just I'm sure many of us are focusing more and more on the migrant labor, which was a left-out group earlier, whether it may be the general migrant labor or the migrant women that has been a focus. But we need to understand that it is not the only problem. It has caused havoc to a huge number of small and medium enterprises of the country, leading to further job loss, and also has created a slow demand, a slump in production, and there is a vicious cycle related to it. Not just that, we also say that there is a rural angle to this, where we find that the rural population is even more disadvantaged because of their less preparedness and the lesser cushioning aspects. So we see that this has become a very important area to really get into the depth and understand more about it. So today I'm just going to highlight upon it because we will, I'm sure it requires intensive deliberations, and I'm sure the next 2 days is going to be a very fruitful discussion for all of us. But with this base, we also find that the immediate impacts that we have seen is that there's a massive increase in the unemployment, and there is a dramatic fall in the earnings. An overwhelming majority of farmers could not harvest their crops, could not sell their products, had to sell their products at lower costs. And we also find that there is a depleted savings, and then whatever the savings could be used for future prospects has all been invested, or it has been exhausted. Okay, we also find that this impact has led to, especially the casual and the self-employed workers are the worst hit. And many of them have not received salary or have received reduced salary during this lockdown. Well, to quote, I also wanted to draw the attention, by looking into a small survey done by the Azim Premji University for 8 states. This was conducted among the beneficiaries of the state support, where it was revealed that almost 8 in 10 were eating less food than before. So the quantity has come down. About a third of respondents had taken loan to cover expenses, so they need to depend on borrowing. So whether it may be from the what you call the immediate persons with thick interest, or maybe from banks or whatever, we need to really they had to depend on the loans. Not just that, people do not have enough money to pay the house rents. They also had to deal with job losses and food insecurity. So this is, in general, that's been happening. And this also, we find that this has been happening to certain groups of people. And that is where as sociologists, we are also even more concerned with regard to Dalits, women, Muslims, and those with lower levels of education and lower levels of socioeconomic status. We also understand that the urban residents and migrants have been largely impacted, but rural areas are not too much behind. And even in Odisha, of course, the Azim Premji University has also done a small survey with Odisha too, and there are reports that the lower economic group has largely reported the loss of employment, and especially those with self-employed and agricultural workers, there is a fall in average earnings. So we find that no area is untouched as a result of this COVID. And also the announced relief measures, though they are inadequate, it has not reached large sections of the economically vulnerable population. Well, we understand. So with this backdrop, we find that they have been. I mean, we see that large section is totally disadvantaged because of this, impact. And also, we find that if people are not able to survive themselves with existing resources, they will find they cannot refrain themselves into the houses, and they ought to come out to the streets. And definitely, this endangers the whole planning, which means the principle of social distancing may not operate, and definitely it's going to lead to an increase in the cases. Well, this is what is happening too. I think the unlock period has made us understand all of this, and so mainly the pressures come from the economic pressures. So there are a lot of things. I mean, we need to really look at this from their angle, and then there is a necessity to come up with addressal of these issues. Where mainly we find that there is the necessity for direct cash transfers. I mean, food availability is a major concern, and then we also need to understand that to restrict the loss of livelihoods, it's important that the small and medium enterprises need to be addressed. Packages have to be given to them, and then the employees need to be they need to come back to work. So all of this has to be addressed. And not only that, yes, relief packages are required for different sections of the population. We also need to understand that India being a welfare state, a lot of pension schemes are running in the country, and then there are a lot of dependents for that: old age pension, the widow pension, the disability pension. So all these things has to be taken care of. So there is a necessity for a whole systematic planning and addressing these issues. In fact, this is a wake-up call to the government to increase the spending on the vulnerable section and also the important sectors, especially the health, education, and the economy. But we also understand that decentralization of power would help in managing this issue. So with this, this is just a backdrop as to what's happening. But we also need to go into the more specific aspects, and that is what the focus of this webinar is on. It's about the gendered impact. So when we start looking at the gender impact, we need, as sociologists, or as any researcher, it's important, or as any policymaker, it is important to understand that the base documents, or there's no proper gender analysis, even in the ordinary times, but then especially in this kind of crisis situations, it's important to have gender-based data and have a proper analysis based on that. So whether it may be, whether even in Puducherry, we do not have the strong database to really work on. So I think is an important area as sociologists we need to really focus on. And we also find that these gender implications are not homogeneous; it's vast and varied. The livelihood of men and women during the COVID-19 are adversely affected, but women are hit harder. Evidence shows that gender differences in the initial stages or the initial conditions of their growth or the life course perspective has an impact, or it has limited the access to certain resources, which includes education, assets, opportunities, and also the strict norms across different stages of the life courses. And combined with life events, with later life events, and also crisis, limits the ability, and also there is a close link between the risks of poverty and health. And we find that over the years, what has accumulated would also affect whether which affected later stages, whether it may be old age or it may be kind of crisis like this. It definitely affects. So the gender issues are a serious or an important one which we need to look into. In the current COVID-19 situation, women bear a heavy burden, mainly due to the care, the out-of-school children. Because of these closures, we find that there is a heavy burden on the women, especially because of the caregiving role, the children, as well as the sick, which may be elderly or may be affected by the virus, whatever. The caregiving role has increased, which was relatively better prior to the COVID situation. Women were just moving out of the caregiving role and into the employment domain, but I think it has received a setback after this COVID-19 situation. So you find that because of the caregiving role, they face heavy burden, And not only just that, there is a reduction for them in the economic opportunities. Both men and women are affected, but women do, face it a little more. There is a reduction for them in terms of the health services, and there is also an increase in the intimate partner violence and also rise in the domestic violence, which I'm sure, which Honorable Vice Chancellor has also indicated right at the beginning. So this combination of care responsibilities and economic crisis reduce the female participation in the labor force. So we find that there is less labor force participation of the women, as even before it was less, but it has even come down now. They have a disproportionate representation in the self-employment and wage employment. So if you see previously too, their share is quite high, the self-employment and wage employment, which has less of social protection and sustainability. We also find that in this particular, the domains, we find there's a high proportion of even the elderly women working. Probably it is because that they need to, especially the poor elderly women, keep working as long as they can. But as they receive, and not just that, so the care responsibilities, the economic crisis has reduced their participation, labor force participation, and they also receive lower returns for the labor and and engage in a range of economic activities which do not have a high payment. They're facing the disease now, as of now, they're facing the disease-driven poverty trap, which is characterized by a combination of health effects on poverty and poverty on health. So at this point, it is important that there should be well-designed policies to help them at different stages. And there's a necessity for them, a necessity on the side of the government to really focus on the adolescents, the middle-aged, and also the elderly. So special strategies has to be designed to help. When we look at the link between the health and poverty, of course, we also at this particular point of time we find that the women have a risk even in terms of the health, which includes the health vulnerabilities, because we see that there's a large share of women in the healthcare sector as frontline healthcare workers. And not just that, they are also at home, busy being the caregivers. So they are the family caregivers, and which makes them more exposed to infection. So we find that at the broader level, they are more exposed. So, because of their caregiving role. We also find that there is an occupational segregation, which might bring different levels of exposure, because mainly because in certain occupations there are more women. We find there's a necessity to support them, especially in terms of providing protective equipment and materials, and also do a better testing or to increase the testing for the high risk population where the frontline workers, women being the frontline workers, is also to be addressed. So this is one part. We only are just trying to tell that they are the risk situations, but we also find that men seem to be overrepresented among the fatalities. So there is more men seem to experience, but we also need to understand that there is an increasing number of female-headed households as a result of that, which also means ultimately a greater number of female-headed households are also linked to poverty. So this particular crisis would also increase the pressure on the women and also the single-headed families. We also find that there is a shift in the resources towards the public health emergency, but it also disrupts the key healthcare services for the women, especially the reproductive healthcare services. There is an increasing evidence of pregnant women not in a position to attain to receive the care, especially the vaccination. Both the mother and the child are have been missed out on many of these immediate healthcare needs. So, and also we find there is a range of intimate partner violence, which and also domestic violence, as we stated earlier. But it also is linked to the higher levels of physical and mental health issues, and directly it has issue, and indirectly too it influences on the workforce participation, their earnings, their independence, and their survival too. So we find that we also find the social and gender norms which the women women have experienced in the course of life has also an impact on the educational investment decisions and also the intra-household allocation of resources. So both as adults, that experience has made them have limited capabilities, and also even in this present condition, we find that many of the girls seem to suffer because of this allocation of resources, and especially with the no access to IT, it makes the girl children a little more vulnerable than what they were earlier. We also find that the school closures has increased the burden of care-related tasks, which also means that the girls are also more engaged in these tasks, and then school dropouts are likely to be high. So it's opening up a Pandora box. It is going to give a much more serious issue. We thought we actually in the progress of women were thinking that we were moving forward, but anyway, these kind of crises is again giving a setback, and we need to intensify the plans and strategies to to speed up the progress again. So there's a whole lot of requirement in future. But we also then coming specifically to the focus of the economic focus on the general implications on the economic conditions. We understand that globally, there is this report of multiple care responsibilities, and also the exit from labor market. As a result of this, we find there is a direct impact on the food security, and definitely in our Indian conditions where the norms are against women having food first, there's always mostly the intake is more in favor of men and boys. But in this context, social messaging and also creating an awareness regarding this and an emergency response to contribute to a more balanced nutrition at the household level is very important. And we also find that women are largely engaged in informal work and other forms of vulnerable forms of employment, which leaves them out of the social protection schemes which are targeted for the workers. And we also find that women make up 39% of the global employment, but women account for 54% of the job loss. So there is greater job loss for women. So whatever was giving them the support, whatever was giving them the independence, they have lost it. We also find that about 1 to 8% of the women are more vulnerable, and also we find the even in terms of in the rural households, we find female small landholders are suffering due to this. They have problems in terms of production, in terms of food prices, moving to the market, provision of timely support, etc. So all areas are being affected, and whether it may be urban, rural, young, old, everywhere it has been affected, and especially the economic downturn has affected the women to a large extent, and it has a very direct influence upon their health aspects as well. We also find that women are there are sex segregations in these sectors and occupations, which also makes them either too dependent on certain things, and then layoffs really risks them. So we need to understand that there is a necessity for social protection. Responses are required, and cash transfer programs are very, very important. And we need to really, identify the vulnerable groups and also the women-headed households and target them in terms of these emergency responses. We also find that special programs for the women to return to economic activity is very important, and it would play a central role. And we also need to ensure that women return back to work as early as possible. We also, because of these, the various economic reasons, there are also issues in the other areas as well. So the other agencies should gear up to take care of them, especially the the domestic violence aspects and the other health aspects. It needs to be addressed. So it's also required that safety nets be provided to women during the crisis. But we also understand that it took time for us to really respond to it. Even the National Commission for Women, it took months time to respond, and we have the one-stop center for the crisis management. So I understand, especially the income support and also the the informational support at this point of time. is very important, and the institutional strategies and efforts would play a very important role in managing the situation. And especially the key issue here is that the disproportionate presence of women in the informal sector and the lack of social protection mechanisms are the ones which has a greater impact on the livelihood, and there is an impending danger of them to lead to poverty. So mainly we also find it's not just the institutional systems, but also the patriarchal norms also plays an important role in their the rest. So we know that many men are also facing job losses and conflicting demands, but it's much more for the women. So there is a need for special effort to address these issues. And we also need to understand that the COVID pandemic has made it clear that women's role has to be understood, and their vulnerable areas has to be addressed. So I'm sure as the institutional heads, as members of decision-making bodies, as members of academic forums, there's a greater role for us to be sensitive to the gender concerns and address the issues more holistically. So I would, with this, I would like to conclude that it is a very, very relevant topic, and we need to address these issues with a serious concern. So with this, thank you all for listening to me. I hope we would have more deliberations in the process, and I'm sure I've taken a longer time. So over to Dr. Manusmita. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for your academic, insightful and thought-provoking ideas on COVID-19, moving from global and reaching and covering all the regional areas and the problems and issues as well. Thank you, madam. There's a small announcement that respected participants, you can, if you have any observation or any questions, you can give in the chat box that will be addressed in our open session towards the end of this session. And now moving on to the next agenda, we have with us the star attraction of the day. Our keynote speaker of the day, Professor Ashok Kumar Kaul from Banaras Hindu University. He is one of the radiating stars in the galaxy of Indian sociologists who has established themselves as scholars of international eminence. As a sociologist of repute, he is well known for his contribution to Indian sociology. It will not be wrong to say he represents the face of sociology of Banaras Hindu University. In a sense, he has played a pioneering role in the making of the Department of Sociology, GM University. We owe our academic identity to him. Our keynote speaker, Professor Ashok Kumar Kaul, is Emeritus Professor in Sociology in Banaras Hindu University. Professor Kaul is a versatile academician with 3 decades of teaching and research experience both within and abroad. His academic insights...
Enough.
Sir, few words. His academic insights find manifestation through high-level publications, academic productions, including 5 books, and best part of his sociology, he has applied his lens to the study of identity and nativity in the turbulent state of Jammu and Kashmir. His books are published in reputed publishing houses, Rawat, Authors Press, Pearson International, and BDM Germany. His ideas and insights are also ingrained in the articles published by him in the national and international journals. We have a privilege that we have with us Sir, who serves as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Klagenfurt, Austria, and the Department of Sociology, University of Alberta. He chaired the workshop on cultural decentering in the 19th ISE conference at the prestigious Oxford University. Professor Kaul is not only an author, but he facilitates academic production of young scholars by associating himself with various journal and research centers. He has the distinction of being associated with many reputed journals as a member of the editorial committee. Sir, his long career as an academic leader has enabled him to produce 16 doctoral fellows and many postdoctoral fellows. We are really honored, sir, to have you with us in this platform of GM University. Now I would welcome and request Professor Ashok Kaul, sir, to deliver his keynote address. Sir, please.
Esteemed Vice Chancellor, Professor Patti, I must acknowledge that some months ago I was with you, and there was a wonderful company and nice to know about university, about you. I'm really grateful to you that you gave me the chance of meeting you. Today, it's
Thank you,
really a
sir.
privilege
Thank
to be
you.
with you. Today is again a privilege to be with you, with this audience and the participants. I wish I would deserve all those compliments which our young student did pay to us, colleague paid to us, but I'm sure that I don't deserve that much. Anyway, back to the business. Whatever my predecessors has spoken about it, I would like to put it in a theoretical framework. You know, for the last many months, the whole world is under the lockdown. And in this process of lockdown, this COVID-19 has shown us the mirror. Mirror that the world order is not all well. Mirror that this world order, which is based on patriarchy, which was based on modernization, modernity, almost all has collapsed down. And this collapse of down and showing mirror by COVID-19 has brought us to this perspective of thinking that what next? So I understand the unprecedented changes that have taken place over the couple of decades have made us to believe that the modernity's rupture, and the rupture of modernity gave us the coin of gender, as you know it. In 1960s of previous century, we have this word of gender. Before that, the word was not there. Not that the women's studies were not there, the women was not there, but then this gender has come as a coinage because of the rupture of modernity that came out of the collapse of functionalism, out of the collapse of the emergence of the new social movements, especially feminist movements, especially gender movements, Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, and rise of existentialism. So we had, when these movements were emerging in the West, in the North universities, women were known as housemaker, domestic engineers, and then the division of labor was taught to be that it should be now sharing of labor rather than a division of labor. So when it came to India in 1974 as a report of towards inequality report that was by Lotika Sarkar and Neera Desai, and it was an insightful report. It showed where we stand. We were neither a modernized country, nor we were keeping up with the old traditions, and women's position was a dismissal, whether it was caste, whether it was patriarchy, or it was dropouts, health position, or it was the missing women. It was total negligence. Maybe things would have proven better, but we had an emergency and social decentering of Indian society. You know, post-emergency led to the decentering of Indian society, rise of new regional elites, new political consciousness that make a centricity towards right and left equally in proportionate distributions. And because of decentering of Indian society, these movements did come out that what about gender, what about Dalits, what about those marginal societies who were ignored or were taken as for granted as a part of patriarchal society. So I must tell you here that whether it was religion, it had ignored women. I don't mean about the Indian Hinduism. Hinduism, we can be debated about this religion of books. They have ignored religion. They have told that perennial sin was caused because of women. Then if we come to the modernity, it had ignored gender, it had ignored women. It would consider it either through the race or through the class, and thought that with the process of modernization, the melting of thesis will merge all these issues of gender into one, and the world might be beautiful. So when it comes to India, we had all these streams coming together. When all these streams came together, this report of towards equality had given us this idea that we had to think about it. There were state-sponsored programs, definitely. And these state-sponsored programs make us believe that women capabilities, women empowerment, has to come in one form or another. And these, excuse me, and these programs were being initiated, but unfortunately we had this globalization. This globalization caused new economic policy. It created new social political identity. It made borders transcendent, but the problems were almost all there. And in this new economic policies, globalization, capitalism and market friendly world, we see that agriculture became very difficult proportion of realm. Agriculture became very costly, that there was a wave of migrations or displacement toward the cities. And in this displacement of cities, we had new process of symbolic capitalism, social capital theory, where the new people would go through agencies, through contacts, through establishment communications, with the result they lost the touch with the rural people. Unfortunately, what happens when you come to the cities, this displacement of churning of migrations, you are market oriented. If you do not have a purchasing capacity, if agriculture becomes costly, the brunt is felt by the women. So that two-sex theory, that women would be happy with the domestic realm, did change, and women has to come to the open market. Where coming to the open, it lost its significance. Its own identity, which was being mystified when she was in a domestic realm, got almost all disillusioned. And with this disillusionment, women neither were top on the public sector, market sector, nor they could attain that identity which they had during this at their home levels. So women became a vulnerable sect of society. So what it means? It means that domestic violence increased proportionally. There was disintegration of families. Marriages did not last. At the same time, women's education, women's health, it deteriorated. And she was told that you ought to be blamed for the population outburst. Whereas Michel Foucault tells us that she was told that you had to be on the television, you had to be on this consumer culture as a symbol of a capitalism. Therefore, she became a nervous woman. So women became nervous due to capitalistic market pressures, due to consumerism. Women became guilty that as she is responsible for this population outburst, population syndrome, and at the same time, their capacity building empowerment was subject to the institutional framework. If constitution and institution gave certain leverages through Panchayati Raj, through empowerment of rural initiative programs, but at the same time, the citizenry role, it almost all diminished. So when COVID-19 did come to us, it was absolutely showing us that this patriarchal order cannot last long. If this patriarchal order is sustaining, then it will have a fractured society. So we see all over the world, if you can observe it, if you can find it, women at the helm of affairs all over the world have proven well, have proven better. So there is a constant collaboration of nature and women, which were ignored by modernity, which were ignored by religions, and it is sounding back. We cannot ignore nature, and we cannot ignore women. So this gender as a coinage, which is like a euphemism, the sense of well-being, has come out of the rupture of modernity. We have to think about our traditions, which are not caste traditions, which is not Sati tradition, but identified traditions that have given women parity, equality, and identity and dignity. Those traditions are in our society. So I understand when we come to this phase of life where the new order is in making, it is new truth, post-truth, new normal. This all comes to focus to a point where women are asking not for her share, but women is asking to recognize that this patriarchal world has to be done. And in this process, I understand the world will demand now that there has to be parity, there has to be dignity, there has to be mutual attraction, and there has to be sexuality in women-man relationships. And both are the two pillars of the same coin, and both have to be moved together. So division of labor, if it comes to the share of labor, if it is back, then in both the realms, there has to be dignity. This is the message of the times. I understand. Otherwise, my predecessor speaker, Vice Chancellor, and another speaker, they have wonderfully told the details, the gloomy picture which we are into at present, that because of these back to the villages, migration back to their roots, and caused by their health, deaths, and dropouts, and additional pressure in the domesticity, violence. These are the things which are already there in the society, but women and this COVID-19 has only shown us mirror to it. I understand if we become enlightened citizens, and we bring back our identified traditions and think over it, have a mutual respect for each one of others, then the institutional norms, institutional building, institutional merit, constitutional provisions will work. With these words, I think there's a turning in the society, there's a turning in the whole all over world order, and in this world order, India has a definite picture, definite messages to give, and that is that there's an alternate modernity. That alternate modernity rests on women parity. We have such schools in philosophy, Kashmiri Shaivism, and there are other schools of philosophy which tells it is not Maya the word. Women is as important as Shiva. Shakti is as important as Shiva. Therefore, both Shiv Shakti has to develop together, revert together to make this world beautiful. I know those are passing through a very gloomy period of history, but this shall also pass, and we'll be back to the normal life. When we come back to normal life, the only thing that will save us is the parity, dignity, mutual respect for each other, and that is why how marriages, how families will work in future. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We are indeed honored and we are so happy to have you with us to hear your insightful speech and ideas on Corona and especially relating to women issues. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I hand over the next open session to be coordinated by Dr. Kumud Panigrahi, sir.
Uh, Thank you so much, madam. Uh, the lecture was really insightful. I really want to thank Professor Aruna ma'am for her insightful lecture on gender aspect of COVID-19, and she has spoken on various issues on gender. Like one of the important point I want to highlight is that she has critically reflected the ideas of social distancing that the media understanding that today we are using. So instead of using social distancing as a term to explain the contemporary crisis, we must use the term physical distancing, because social distancing is very much attached with the idea of hierarchy and discrimination. And another point I would like to highlight that suggested by Madam is that across the globe, even in Indian society, that different communities, religious groups have suffered greatly. However, the suffering of women is something special and need to be addressed by the policymakers and also state actors. And as a human being, as a citizen of this country, it is our own responsibility also to look after the gender issues, women issues inside our home and outside our localities. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful lecture and insightful deliberation. And to thank Professor Osokal, it was a very interesting and enlightening lecture within some short span of time, and he has spoken various, ideas in terms of the agricultural crisis and also the significance of women to protect the nature and to, constantly continue the social structure of our society. As a sociologist, he has suggested to understand and also acknowledge the significance of women, and he has correlated women with the nature. So women and nature are much significant, and as soon as we would recognize, consider and acknowledge this reality, we will be moving towards a better society, a improved society. And thank you so much, sir, for your positive hope that patriarchy will not work, no longer continue. So the significance of women, their presentation in the all across social and institutional structure is increasing. So we have very less question from the different participants, but we have received one question for Professor Aruna ma'am. The question is addressed by Vishwaranjan Jena. He's a faculty of sociology, and his question is any few instances on the picture with relation to positive aspect of COVID-19 on sociology. Ma'am, this is a question for you by Vishwaranjan Jena, and so you can respond.
Thank you, Dr. Kumata. Well, with regard to positive aspects, I'm really not very comfortable with that. But anyway, we understand that more women are into school, more women are into the new types of labor and new labor market. Probably with a bit more orientation towards skill building and towards capacity building, as sir had already mentioned, increasing the capabilities. I'm sure it would have a better situation. But I do not have evidence of saying that there are many positive aspects of COVID-19. No, only thing is that yes, fatality rates are less. That's okay, good. But then the caregiving role has been really a burden, so it has put pressure on them. But if proper interventions are there, if proper policies are there, if proper capabilities are built, understanding the situation, it could turn out to be a situation where Beyond could manage well. So that is all I can say. But there are no, as such, to my knowledge, as of now, there are not many positive incidents. But then, yes, many women are managing it quite well. Though they are, they are facing the difficulties, the whole family is taken care. So that way it is fine. But I think there not needs to be done. There are more of issues that needs to be addressed. So I think that is where the highlight is. Right. Okay. I do not know, Vishwaranjan Jana, you have any specific queries? Okay. But then we need to wait and see. It will take some time. In fact, the gender concerns were not addressed in the previous epidemics as well, except in the Ebola virus. During the Ebola virus, there was some analysis, but other than that, we don't have any proper evidence to support that. Okay, this is all that I could say for the time being. But I hope there will be more positive instances.
Ma'am, there is another question.
Yes.
By Gayatri Panda. The
Okay.
question is, please throw some light on impact of COVID on remote areas girls.
Yes, I would start explaining from this. Both the tribal women and also the rural women are being heavily affected, largely because one, there's first of all lack of access to health services. As a result of this pandemic, that has been firstly affected, and then we understand that a lot of these women are self-employed. So when they are into these self-help groups, when they are self-employed, it really has an impact on the produce. So we find that yes, their economy has been destabilized. Their primary food for survival is a big question. Not just that, we find this COVID has also affected girls and women, which means sexual abuses are quite high. As I said earlier, intimate partner violence, because that was not the focus, I did not really get into it. But yes, there's an increase in the rise of reports and, this abuse, sexual abuse especially. And especially this containment lockdown has really restricted their mobility and to even seek help from others. So there is no specific quarter that, like everyone is equally, has a problem, but as people who are remote and then less people to ask support for, less chances to interact, it has become a problem. And I think now they are trying to, international agencies and national agencies are looking for ways by which they can reach out to these people and help them in all ways. So it's not necessarily only in the economic domain, in all other domains, it has its spillover. Yes, that's it. So yes, tribal produce, they say most affected are the tribal women because they are not able to sell. Most of what they collect from the forests, they are not able to sell. So their lives are affected. Rural are affected, especially because small farmers, wage earners, because there is a difference in wage differences, but also the availability of work, and also the cost of the prices are, the cost of the products are higher. So as women-headed households or women who are managing households, they find it very difficult, and also they have their own mental health issues because of the care burden. And also we find that most men are at home, and many a time the household responsibilities, we also have, have a report stating that they're more engaged into shopping and childcare, but then the actual physical labor is being done. So, and if there is much more sharing of responsibilities, things should be better. Okay, I do not know if I have addressed a specific question, but yes, this is all part, related to that. So the empirical evidence states that. So I'm sure, Gayatri, I have answered your question. Yes, there is.
Ma'am, there is another question for you by Shakti Patra.
Okay.
The question is on particularly vulnerable tribal groups in India. That is COVID-19 affect the PVTG women differently. Each COVID-19 affect the particularly vulnerable tribal groups women differently. This is the question for you.
Yes, it has its differential impact. See, not everybody feels the impact in the same manner. The kind of the resources that you have, really affects your receiving capacity or the impact. So if you're already disadvantaged, the more you're disadvantaged, the more impact it would be. So especially the tribal women, when they have lesser resources at hand, and they have lesser chances to get out of this kind of a vicious cycle, it becomes all the more difficult. Yes, it is not homogeneous. It has differential impact. The intensity is more when your accumulation of resources is less. But it also differs. In some communities, if there is a much more equality, things are better. But if there is much more inequality, yes, it is, they are at the receiving end. Did I address?
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. So now we'll request Professor Ashok to address his question. So as if now that there is one question for you, sir. The question is raised by Asutosh Parimani, and the question is how to relate the engineering losses due to the COVID-19 in sociological view.
Engineering losses?
Engineering losses due to the COVID-19 in sociological view.
Well, I understand engineering losses. You mean these constructions or making of bonds, or you mean social engineering? What does it mean? Does it mean physical engineering or social engineering or transformation of society? Or what does it mean? Does it mean economics, raise of economics, engineering? Or does it mean social engineering in terms of changing social values or norms? If it is engineering losses, it means that we were disconnected with this workers when this COVID-19 did come to us. It came like a shock wave. We never knew that there are almost 400,000 workers, more than that, workers in the towns or the cities. When they have to go back, I think state was disconnected. It didn't realize the colossal tragedy will befell on these poor people, and they went back to their places, and they were from non-places. You can imagine where to go. They had cut their roots from the places where they had come. In their own villages, the agriculture, they had no agricultural, so much of agricultural lands where they would work. There was no work in their own villages. And therefore, when they go back, they were the earners. When they go back, they were further burden on their own people. So it was a double loss. In the roadside, they suffered. When going back, they suffered there. Therefore, the engineering work will have to suffer, unless when they are invited back to these cities or places of work, their state has to think properly about each and one individual, whether it's a woman or a man. If they come, they cut their roots back from the villages. If they come back to these towns and go back to there, they have to be assured. Insurance should be there, health provision should be there, and something about their living, something about their home. If such tragedy again befell, like a criminal violence or a natural violence or something like that, these people have some scopes of place to live in a dignified way. So I think the engineering losses will go down there. It is with the, if neoliberalism is the market value, that you have to go only with the profit making. You don't care for those people who die. If they are not functional for a society, let them die. It is happening all over the world now. So that's why engineering profession will groom to the extent that it is linked with those persons who are functional. It will minus the mass people who will suffer the way they have been suffering.
Sir, thank you so much. You have another question. Like the question is, due to COVID-19, women cannot go in her workplace. Then how they manage their livelihood? So how to manage the livelihood of women?
Well, India is not a one monolithic society. It is diverse. It has different mode of productions. It has different cultures. It depends how stable your family is. If you look at the cosmopolitan cities and towns, it is very difficult for a woman to manage things. If she is not is not a regular salaried person, or if family is not stable. If family is not stable and women believes in outsourcing or outwork, then it is very paid work or daily wages, then it is definitely difficult for her, because we have demystified the aura of women. We were understanding that she is as good as a goddess to us, as she is this and that. If we demystify this, capitalism and consumerism has demystified her. In this demystification, she should have her own empowerment, and state should think about it. She should be given individual to individual, significantly something wages, something cash resources to her name, not her husband's name. Because if she's like that, it depends on how the families are stable. Some families are stable, women do not suffer. Some families are not stable, women suffer most. They suffer domestic violence, they suffer economic crunch of economic resources, they suffer health problems, and they die. Therefore, women were neglected all the time. Despite Andhra Bitte would tell us that in independent India, we have more women education. But women education doesn't mean that we have women empowerment harmoniously, at parity, evenly, from villages to towns, from towns to the villages. Therefore, in different era, with these differences, I think state has to be responsible. Citizenry has to be responsible. Trusteeship has to be responsible. We are back to that trusteeship formula. We are back to that citizenry. And unless these things are very responsible, I think that the society will suffer. Other neoliberalism means let them die who are dying if they are not functional to the society, if they are not functional to the market. It is happening with women. It is happening with the students. It is happening with everything, with all over the globe. So we have to think about it. We have to bring Gandhi back.
Sir, there is another question for you by Lucy Jena. Her question is, how can women inject both Shiva and Shakti energy during the worldwide massive pandemic, where women heavily burdened with gender roles at the family during COVID-19?
Well, I think the time has come for them. I think this was the unprecedented changes which have taken place for the last 3 centuries, have made us believe that all is not well with the world. Countries are disintegrating. World powers like US or Western world, it is almost all coming down, collapsing, and new powers are emerging. So in this alliance churning, we see patriarchy and religions and neoliberalism, neo-capitalism. It has not done good with the mass and majority of the people, especially with those women. So Michel Foucault would tell us that women has become nervous women in modernity. Women has become women, that perennial sin religion has attributed to the women. Therefore, I think time has come to her rescue. Nature is showing mirror to this world that dignity, parity, sexuality, and mutual attraction will be the only basis where men and women can meet. I think empowerment is a very necessary thing. I am reminded of a share of a Parveen Saqib, if you may understand in Urdu. Haye re jaan se guzarne se bada sanha hai. The tragedy is not death. Tragedy is shoke parwaz ka toote hue par mein rehna. That your wings are cut. You want to fly. Women want to fly. You are given responsibilities to women. I think they have done wonderful jobs. They can do multitasking. They know they can do, they are adaptable. they are stretchable, they are decent, they are non-violent many times, they don't want wars. This has been proven empirically that the women who are at the helm of affairs globally, their countries have done well, whether it is New Zealand or Germany or any other country. So why don't they get a chance now? It is patriarchy, it is this world order which has to melt down, and women have to be empowered, they have to be capacity building, and once at that draw their boundaries. If they draw their boundaries, these are my boundaries, I have to live with this boundary. Unless I am empowered, I must know myself, who am I? And once these things do come up, I think women will come out. Whether it may be my sister, my daughter, or my wife, or my mother.
Sir, you have some questions. So we are want to take two questions. So one is by
Please.
Krusi Sahu. He is the PhD scholar at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and his question is on the unpaid work burden at women, unpaid work burden at home by women and girls. So how to address this issue in sociological perspective? This is one question, sir. And another question is by Ankita Chakravarti. She is a student of Sociology, GM University. And her question is to how can funders leverage the learning emerging from the COVID-19 crisis to inform enhance resilience? And the third question is raised by Mirasmita Sahu. Sir, can you please throw some light on the role of women in home during COVID-19 pandemic? How significant their role is for the society? So, sir, you can address the question.
Dr.
If you want to
Kumudha, yeah,
address,
I can address the last question if you want, because sir is not here. So in case,
yeah.
I think it's about the role of women during COVID-19, isn't it? Well,
Yes.
their role is very, very significant. There is no question about it, because they are the primary caregivers and also, kind of responsible for the economic activity, even kind of balancing the food at, availability at home. So there's nothing that, kind of stops them, or at least their contribution is very, very significant. And not just that, when the institutional mechanisms are not functional as it is noted with the other situations, like for example, whether the old age support or whatever.
Hello.
So during those situations, definitely, the informal care, the role of women, really is very, very significant. So there is no doubt about it. So I think I addressed your question. Yeah.
So, sir,
Yeah, and also
you can continue, sir.
yes, so please, because sir, you were not connected. I just thought I will take it up. Over to you, sir.
Okay. What are the questions? I didn't hear because it just got cut.
Okay, sir. Just I want to repeat the questions. That the question is one question raised by Dakrusi Sahu. He is a PhD scholar at JNU, New Delhi, and his question is: could you please shed light on unpaid work burden at home by women and girls from sociological perspective? This is one question, and another question is raised by Ankita Chakravarti. She is student of sociology, GM University, and her question is: donors seems to be redirecting funds for climate to health. How can funders leverage the learning emerging from the COVID-19 crisis to inform, enhance resilience? And another question is raised by Madhusmita Sahu. Her question is, sir, please throw some light on the role of women in home during COVID-19 pandemic. How significant their role is for the society? So, sir, these three questions, sir, you can respond.
Well, I understand.
Sir.
Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Let me put it off first. Hello?
You are audible, sir.
Okay.
We can hear you.
I think now this COVID-19 has given us enough time that women need to be empowered not from only themselves, but they have to see that they have to trace their boundaries and know their strengths in a sense that they have to be a part of all those programs which empower people. It is only possible if women from the villages, women from the towns, they are educated. And you know, I just give you one example. If you are in a home and people think that you should do work from home, in a home there are hardly 2 rooms. It is always patriarchy oriented, male oriented. The preference will be given to the boy, not to a girl. Therefore, these things have come out first time, and COVID-19 has shown how these realms are different, how these differences lie in each realm. Patriarchy works at each realm of the society. And women can only be liberated from this if there is a cooperation from men. It cannot be two-sex theory. It cannot be biological fundamentalism, which we have seen in 1960s in Western society. In India, both the traditions, both the realms live together, men and women together. And that is only possible if citizenry, trusteeship, and state-sponsored programs work. I am sure all in the time when state has to be a little relativistic. It has to come down from neoliberalism. And people who are dysfunctional, they have to, for the capitalism, or to be taken into care that they are human beings. And women, those who are not educated or in domestic, they have to be taken care of. These questions did emerge in 1960 in Canada, when women were taught to be domestic women or housemakers, domestic engineers, and they were given wages, they were given paid, they were given money by the state itself. So I think now it has come, we have to identify these sectors, we have to identify these women, and I'm sure that this will be new work, new society.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful discussion. And we hope that our participants have greatly benefited through this discussion. And this discussion has helped us to raise many hidden questions in the context of women and COVID-19. And also it helped us to explore in our everyday life regarding the various socio-cultural problems related to women. So now I'd like to request our Honorable Head of the Department, Dr. Manasita Mahapatra, to formally present the vote of thanks for the day.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank all our participants, and special thanks to our keynote speaker and special address speaker. And now on behalf of the Department of Sociology, GM University, we express our deep sense of gratitude to everyone participating here. This webinar would not have been possible without, first of all, the inspiring support of our esteemed Vice Chancellor, sir. He is our energizer and pathfinder. We are grateful to him. We are deeply indebted to Professor C. Aruna, my mentor, for bringing me to this level and enabling us to hold an event of this kind. Madam, I remain indebted to you lifetime. We owe a special sense of indebtedness to the Emperor of the day, Professor Ashok Kumar Kaul, sir, for his blessings, grace, grandeur, and illuminating words. Sir, your support is a lifeline for us. We look forward to your blessings in our further endeavors. We have received huge support from the administrative functionaries of our university. We are grateful to the chairperson, PG Council, Professor Sachitananda Mahapatra, our Dean, Professor Mohin sir, Registrar, Sri Girish Chandra Singh, and Deputy Registrar, Dr. Uma Charan Pati, Research Officer, Dr. Chandan Sahu sir, System Manager, Ashish sir, Priyanka madam, for their support. And most importantly, the unconditional support of our Deputy Registrar sir is immensely valuable in this occasion. We are grateful to the faculty members of the university, faculty members of Department of Anthropology, Nivedita madam and Kalyani madam for their support, and all the faculties across all the departments in GM University for their support. We are deeply give our gratitude to the students, researchers, those who have participated today and helped to bring this 3-day national webinar a great success. Thereby, we end the first day of the 3-day national webinar. I request all of you to join tomorrow for this second day of at 11:30 a.m. There's a small announcement for those who want a certificate. Participation certificate, kindly fill up the feedback form that will be given to you in the last day of the webinar. You fill up the form and you will be getting the certificate. By this, thank you all of you and from the Department of Sociology, GM University. Thank you.